It's 10:31. I would say let us start. We have a really packed agenda. Welcome to everybody. Good morning. This is our fifth FAO Brussels Dialogue organized by the FAO Liaison Office in Brussels. My name is Mirto Arvaniti and I will moderate this event. Today's theme is about youth. Together with our distinguished speakers and panelists, we will discuss the challenges faced by young people in rural areas in Africa, particularly when it comes down to their employment opportunities. I would like to remind to our participants that we have today interpretation from English to French and from French to English. You can tune in to your preferred language at the bottom of the screen where you see interpretation. I like also to remind you that this Brussels Dialogue is being recorded and is being streamed on FAO's YouTube channel. The recording will be available on the FAO Brussels website afterwards and will be sent to you. We encourage you to share your thoughts with us and interact with each other. Just make sure you do this in the right setting, which is the chat box. And for questions, you can use the Q&A box. All of them are at the bottom of your screen. Also, when tweeting, if you tweet about this event, don't forget to use the hashtag FAO Brussels Dialogue. During this event, we will also have a word cloud. That word cloud, it's on menti.com. You can simply open your browser, insert the code you see on the screen right here, and my colleagues will also insert it in the chat box. And the question we have prepared for you today, and you can be free to answer with any words that comes to mind, is what is the biggest barrier to the creation of decent jobs in rural areas in Africa? I know it can be a bit tricky selecting the keywords, but let's give it a try. We will be going back to this word cloud to see how it is shaping throughout our event. So to start this Brussels Dialogue, FAO Brussels Director Rodrigo de la Puerta will be giving some welcoming remarks, and Ms. Marlene Mortler, member of the European Parliament and key member of the European Parliamentary Alliance Against Hunger and Malnutrition, will wrap up the event and will be giving us some closing remarks. A big thank you to Ms. Mortler for being with us. We are also especially honored to have with us today a number of high-level speakers. For the high-level section of our dialogue, I would like to welcome Her Excellency, the Prime Minister of the Republic of Togo, Madame Victoire Tomega Dogbe, Votre Excellence, bienvenue. We are also delighted to count among our high-level speakers, Her Excellency, Madame Josefa Sako, Africa Union Commissioner for Rural Economy and Agriculture. Thank you, Excellency. It is good to have you again with us for one more time. I will be introducing the rest of our distinguished panelists as we go. But first, I would like to give the floor for a short welcome to FAO Brussels Director Rodrigo de la Puerta. Rodrigo, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Mirto, Madame la Première Ministre, Excellencies, dear partners, colleagues, and friends. It is my pleasure to welcome you to this fifth FAO Brussels Dialogue, organized by the Food and Agriculture Organization of the United Nations Liaison Office here in Brussels. I believe this new concept of communication is increasingly becoming a successful way to gather key stakeholders and exchange views on common challenges. Some months ago, we discussed how COVID-19 was making access to food and proper nutrition more difficult. Today, we want to go deeper into the implications of the pandemic for employment. Early in July, for the first time ever, a joint meeting of African Ministers of Agriculture, Finance and Trade, convened by FAO and Ms. Josefa Sako, Africa Union Commissioner, and here with us today, as Mirto mentioned, called on development partners to support the creation of businesses and quality jobs to recover from the pandemic. Nearly half of the world's 3.3 billion members of the global workforce are at risk of losing their livelihoods. More specific to FAO's mission, agricultural and rural livelihoods are responsible for over 38% of employment in low and middle income countries, and food systems directly employ over 1.5 billion people all over the world. Our colleagues and partners in many African countries are deeply concerned about the effects to the world's agri-food value chains. Growing constraints in production, logistics, on the demand side are adding to the challenges which already were affecting job creation. The consequences of COVID-19 around the world are even more challenging for youth, for women, or migrants, those we do not want to leave behind and whose contributions we cannot do without. That's why today we will be discussing young employment. Young people account for around 35% of the workforce in sub-Saharan Africa and 40% in Northern Africa, of which about 40% are women. There's an urgent need to respond, but also an opportunity to build back better, to promote not only employment, but also decent work. In addition, the path to a green recovery constitutes a common consensus for most of us. A stronger and more ambitious partnership with Africa is at the core of the joint efforts of the European Union and of the African Union. Combining sustainable growth with jobs is a cornerstone of the present EU strategy in Africa. This must take into account green transition, digital transformation, migration, and mobility. All of these are factors which influence the creation of jobs in Africa. And it is clear for all of us that peace is closely linked with the socio-political stability of prosperous societies, where labor rights play a critical role. Your Excellencies, dear friends, I'm sure you are eager to listen and interact with our speakers today, as they represent key stakeholders in the partnerships which are needed to succeed in this common effort. Thanks so much to each one of you for being here once again, for joining this FAO Brussels Dialogue, and for moving forward with us in these challenging times. Over to you, Mirto.
Thank you, Rodrigo. Before we move to our high-level interventions today, let us watch a 1-minute video introducing us to today's theme, youth and rural employment. C'est avec plaisir maintenant que je souhaite la bienvenue à son Excellence, la Première ministre de la République du Togo, Madame Victoire Tomega Dogbe. En septembre, Madame Victoire Tomega Dogbe est devenue la première femme nommée à la tête du gouvernement du Togo et est actuellement la seule femme occupant un poste si important en Afrique de l'Ouest. Madame la Première ministre, vous avez la parole.
Je vous remercie, Madame la commissaire à l'économie rurale et à l'agriculture de la Commission de l'Union africaine, Madame la commissaire de l'Union européenne en charge des partenariats internationaux, Monsieur le directeur du bureau de liaison de l'Organisation des Nations Unies pour l'alimentation l'agriculture, FAO à Bruxelles, Monsieur le prix Nobel de la paix 2006, chers participants, chers jeunes entrepreneurs, c'est avec un réel plaisir que je prends part à cette visioconférence au nom de son Excellence, Monsieur Faure Eswazimana Singbe, président de la République togolaise, l'orateur principal sur cette thématique d'une haute importance intitulée « Les opportunités de relance, la création d'emplois pour les jeunes en Afrique ». Permettez-moi, avant tout propos, d'adresser mes sincères félicitations aux organisateurs de cette visioconférence. Et je voudrais saisir cette occasion pour exprimer ma profonde gratitude au directeur général de la FAO pour l'engagement de son institution au service de la sécurité alimentaire pour tous et pour la création d'emplois décents pour les jeunes et les femmes, notamment celles qui vivent en milieu rural en Afrique. C'est également pour moi l'occasion de rappeler et de remercier votre institution pour les 2 distinctions décernées au chef de l'État togolais, notamment en 2013 et en 2015, pour les efforts continus déployés par notre pays dans le domaine de l'amélioration de la sécurité alimentaire et nutritionnelle, également pour la réduction de la prévalence de la sous-alimentation. Mesdames et messieurs, les populations africaines sont essentiellement jeunes. Vous l'avez dit, 70% ont moins de 35 ans et ces jeunes représentent 35% des populations africaines actives. Et concernant le cas particulier du Togo, cette population est composée de 75% de jeunes qui ont moins de 35 ans. Et nous avons plus de 30 000 jeunes actifs togolais de 15 à 35 ans, dont un grand nombre de diplômés qui arrivent chaque année sur le marché du travail. Et pour faire face à cette situation, le Togo s'est engagé dans une politique de création massive d'emplois pour les jeunes, une priorité qui est bien traduite dans notre plan national de développement de 2018 à 2022. Et ce plan, je voudrais le rappeler, vise à créer 500 000 emplois directs pour les jeunes. Et donc, pour nous, l'agriculture est l'un des piliers de l'économie, une des forces de l'économie togolaise qui nous permet de concrétiser cette ambition de création d'emplois. En effet, l'agriculture, pour nous, c'est le véritable moteur de l'économie togolaise pour la création de richesses et d'emplois, puisqu'elle contribue à 40% du PIB national. Elle occupe 65% de la population active pour une superficie cultivable qui est évaluée à 3,5 millions d'hectares, soit 60% de la superficie globale du Togo. Et donc, l'agriculture, pour nous, est le principal pourvoyeur d'emplois. Pour nous également, l'entrepreneuriat agricole apparaît comme un créneau porteur en termes de création d'emplois pour nos jeunes. Nous l'avons expérimenté à travers différents mécanismes. Je donnerai l'exemple du mécanisme incitatif de financement agricole que nous avons mis en place dans la période 2018 à 2020, qui a permis d'accompagner 175 000 entrepreneurs agricoles, dont 160 000 producteurs, et ce qui a permis de créer, par exemple, en un petit peu de temps, 220 000 emplois, et ce qui a permis également de permettre l'accès au financement de plus de 30 millions d'euros pour ces populations rurales, notamment les jeunes, et qui a permis également de sécuriser des marchés pour un montant de 160 milliards, donc environ 250 millions d'euros. Pour nous, c'est illustratif qui montre à quel point, quand on élabore des programmes spécifiques dans le domaine de l'agriculture et en ciblant les jeunes, on peut avoir de très bons résultats. Mesdames et messieurs, dans un contexte mondial qui est fortement marqué par les impacts socio-économiques de la pandémie de la COVID-19, pour nous, le développement de l'entrepreneuriat agricole reste pour nous la voie privilégiée. Et nous l'avons prise en compte dans la feuille de route du gouvernement pour la période 2020-2025. Parce que quand nous voyons l'impact du corona sur la croissance, sur une croissance moyenne pour notre pays de 5,5%, pour 2020, nous avons une estimation de 1%, 1,3%. Donc, vraiment, cette pandémie affecte la croissance du Togo. Également, nous avons vu, après des enquêtes menées par le Conseil national du patronat, que 64% des entreprises estiment avoir subi une perte de leur chiffre d'affaires de plus de 50%. 35% de ces entreprises rencontrent des difficultés pour honorer leurs engagements auprès des services publics. Et 31% s'inquiètent vraiment sur la continuité de leurs activités. Donc, l'impact du corona est réel. Et donc, nous pensons qu'en mettant l'accent sur l'agriculture avec des actions ciblées qui permettent d'arriver à une transformation structurelle de cette agriculture, la rendre beaucoup plus moderne, plus rémunératrice, plus attractive, avec plus de mécanisation, en nous appuyant sur la carte de fertilité, avec une bonne politique de fertilisation qui est adaptée au sol, avec une réforme audacieuse du foncier, une politique de désenclavement des pistes de production, et en alignant cette production agricole sur les besoins du marché avec un accent particulier sur des cultures de rente, nous pensons que nous pouvons réellement faire la différence, et surtout en mettant l'accent sur le secteur promoteur du bio. L'exemple, nous l'avons eu, par exemple, à travers un programme d'appui à l'employabilité et à l'insertion des jeunes sur des secteurs porteurs, notamment le soja, avec une bonne structuration de ces jeunes sur la chaîne agricole de valeur, avec des financements adaptés. Nous avons pu créer également, en l'espace de 3 ans, 150 000 emplois pour ces jeunes-là. Et le Togo, cela a permis au Togo d'enregistrer beaucoup d'avancées, notamment dans la production bio, ce qui a permis de positionner le Togo comme étant le premier pays dans l'espace de la communauté économique des États de l'Afrique de l'Ouest à faire les exportations des produits biologiques vers l'Europe. Le Togo devient ainsi une référence dans la production de produits agricoles bio. Je voudrais également souligner que sous le leadership du chef de l'État togolais, d'énormes efforts ont été déployés pour rendre le Togo plus attractif en assainissant le climat des affaires et en améliorant la gouvernance. Et ces efforts ont été reconnus dans le rapport du Business, classant le Togo comme le premier pays le plus réformateur en Afrique et le 3e dans le monde. Également, le rapport du MCC, le Millennium Challenge Corporation, a confirmé la bonne évolution des performances de notre pays, puisque le Togo, avec 15 indicateurs validés sur 20, se positionne comme le 2e meilleur réformateur dans la zone Afrique après le Cap-Vert. Mesdames, Messieurs, les différents projets, programmes initiés par notre gouvernement près d'une décennie ont contribué à maintenir les jeunes dans les zones rurales et à faire baisser le taux de chômage, même si ce taux reste à améliorer. Nous sommes passés de 8,5% en 2011 à 4,5% en 2015. Et cette baisse continue. Également, ces actions ont influé sur le taux de pauvreté au niveau national, puisque nous sommes passés de 61,7% en 2006 à aujourd'hui à 45% en 2019, parce que nous avons mis l'accent sur des actions qui ciblent le milieu rural avec un accompagnement particulier de ces jeunes-là. Le gouvernement togolais, avec l'appui des partenaires au développement, je le disais tantôt, a mis en place des programmes et projets qui permettent aux jeunes de transformer leurs idées d'entreprise en opportunités d'affaires et de projets concrets, rentables, créateurs d'emplois durables dans le secteur agricole. Nous pouvons citer, à titre d'illustration, la mise en place des zones agricoles aménagées planifiées, la mise en place d'agropoles qui contribuent au développement des chaînes de valeur agricole, de la transformation agroalimentaire, ainsi que de la commercialisation des produits à travers la promotion des petites et moyennes entreprises et même des très petites et moyennes entreprises. Et ces agropoles, dont la mise en œuvre améliore la compétitivité, favorise la création de richesses en milieu rural et sur toute la chaîne agricole et agro-industrielle. Donc, nous mettons également l'accent sur la professionnalisation de l'agriculture à travers le développement et l'amélioration des filières de formation. Le Togo a fait le choix, par exemple, d'adapter la formation des jeunes aux besoins de l'économie et ainsi, nous mettons en place des instituts de formation en alternance pour le développement, par exemple dans le domaine de la pisciculture, de l'élevage. En tout cas, c'est vraiment ciblé qui permet de créer une nouvelle génération de jeunes entrepreneurs agricoles et mieux outillés. Nous avons d'autres dispositifs et mesures de facilitation d'accès, parce que c'est important également l'information sur l'accès, l'information agricole qui complète ces différents mécanismes. Et donc, par exemple, la plateforme bourse agricole et alimentaire ou le marketplace en ligne qui a été lancé par le gouvernement permet de faciliter la commercialisation des produits alimentaires agricoles et aussi de disposer en temps réel d'un maximum de flux de données sur les transactions effectuées en termes de volume de prix et de stock. Mesdames et messieurs, je voudrais mentionner également qu'il y a eu des dispositifs spécifiques qui ont été mis en place par notre gouvernement dans ces temps de crise sanitaire pour sauvegarder les emplois, surtout pour les jeunes. Le gouvernement a lancé, par exemple, un plan de riposte agricole à la COVID-19 en avril 2020 qui a pour objectif de maintenir les efforts de développement déjà faits dans ce domaine et en mobilisant des ressources pour soutenir des activités des différents maillons des chaînes de valeur agricole. Par exemple, le programme de crédit digital IOLIM qui permet de mettre à disposition des prêts à taux d'intérêt nul aux petits exploitants agricoles pour l'achat d'intrants et la location d'équipements agricoles. Également, une plateforme numérique de financement des jeunes a été mise en place pour financer les besoins en fonds de roulement de ces jeunes entrepreneurs pour leur permettre de faire face aux conséquences de la COVID-19. Il y a eu un financement spécifique qui a été mis en place d'environ 30 millions d'euros par l'État togolais pour renforcer les dispositifs existants en vue de soutenir la relance des micro, petites et moyennes entreprises. Sur le plan fiscal, douanier, des mesures ont été également adoptées, telles que l'allègement des actions de regroupement, la réduction de l'impôt de société, la suppression des contrôles fiscaux, etc. Et sur le plan social, nous devons le rappeler, le gouvernement a apporté un soutien significatif au pouvoir d'achat des ménages les plus vulnérables par la mise en place d'un programme de transfert monétaire dénommé Non-Vici. Toute la population a également bénéficié de la gratuité de l'eau, de l'électricité pour la tranche sociale pendant une période de 3 mois. Nous devons également signaler que les jeunes, pendant cette période de crise, se sont mobilisés, sont des jeunes volontaires, des jeunes artisans, pour soutenir les communautés dans lesquelles ils vivent à travers des opérations de sensibilisation sur les gestes barrières, production de solutions, de lavage de mains, de disposition de masques artisanaux, de masques de protection. Mesdames et messieurs, chers entrepreneurs, le cas illustratif de notre pays, le Togo, montre à suffisance que nous pouvons oser et réussir des politiques novatrices pour faire de l'agriculture le fer de lance de la résilience de nos économies et le véritable pourvoyeur d'emplois décents en faveur des jeunes et des femmes en Afrique. Nous l'avons expérimenté au Togo. La COVID plutôt est une menace, mais en même temps pour nous est une belle opportunité pour nous de rebondir. Et donc, nous pensons qu'il faut absolument développer une grande solidarité, développer une responsabilité partagée de la paix en Afrique, parce que l'environnement est assez instable. Donc, cette responsabilité partagée de la paix en Afrique, et également mettre le développement durable et l'anticipation des crises futures au cœur des priorités de nos pays. Nous devons donc travailler constamment à renforcer notre capacité de réponse et d'adaptation au changement, qu'il soit climatique, qu'il soit sanitaire ou autre. Nous devons également favoriser la mise en place des services sociaux de base dans les milieux ruraux. Et d'ailleurs, le plan stratégique de notre pays pour les 5 années met un accent particulier sur le renforcement de l'inclusion et de la solidarité nationale. Et ceci se passe par la mise en place des infrastructures sociales en milieu ruraux pour réduire les disparités. Je parle des services de santé, de base, d'éducation, d'énergie, l'eau potable, les pistes de désenclavement, pour pouvoir assurer le bien-être de ces citoyens, de nos citoyens, de nos concitoyens dans leur milieu, et ceci se fait à travers le développement à la base et à travers une décentralisation réussie, pour nous permettre de générer une classe moyenne qui permet également de consommer les biens locaux. Nous devons privilégier la transformation des matières premières, de nos matières premières en produits semi-finis. L'exemple du Togo, du phosphate, le Togo est un grand producteur de phosphate. Nous avons du phosphate. Aujourd'hui, nous avons pris l'option de transformer le phosphate en engrais pour le rendre accessible pour nos paysans à des coûts abordables. Nous avons donc pris cette option-là. Et nous avons également pris l'option de continuer par améliorer les rendements pour pouvoir permettre des rendements agricoles, pour permettre d'avoir une agriculture performante. Nous avons également mis l'accent sur la réforme foncière, parce qu'un des défis auxquels nous sommes confrontés, c'est le foncier. Et nous avons pris conscience de ce défi-là et nous allons accélérer la réforme foncière pour rendre la terre disponible pour les jeunes et pour les femmes. Nous allons mettre un accent particulier sur le développement des clusters agro-industriels. J'ai parlé des agropoles tantôt, mais ceci va se faire en partenariat avec le secteur privé. Donc, tout ce que nous ferons, c'est pour rendre beaucoup plus attractive cette agriculture et attirer les investisseurs privés, aussi bien nationaux qu'internationaux, dans ce secteur-là. Nous orientons déjà et nous allons renforcer cette orientation des jeunes vers la transformation agroalimentaire et faire en sorte que cette transformation agroalimentaire et les modes de production soient basés sur la demande du marché et de façon durable, parce que la COVID nous a montré qu'il y a un raccourcissement des chaînes d'approvisionnement. Et donc, nous allons beaucoup plus cibler le marché régional et faire en sorte que ces jeunes puissent être orientés vers le marché régional avec des facilités que nous mettons en place. Nous allons mettre en place également, j'avais parlé tantôt du mécanisme incitatif de financement qui existe déjà, mais qui sera renforcé parce que ça permet de partager le risque. Beaucoup de banques n'osent pas aller dans le domaine de l'agriculture, ils n'osent pas accompagner les jeunes, mais à travers le mécanisme incitatif de financement et de partage de risque, aujourd'hui, les banques acceptent d'accompagner non seulement l'agriculture, mais également les jeunes, qui a été toujours considéré comme une cible assez volatile. Et donc, ça permet de rassurer tous les acteurs. Et nous allons mettre un accent particulier sur l'assurance agricole. Nous continuerons d'innover pour apporter des nouvelles solutions, surtout dans le secteur de l'emploi en milieu rural, réadapter les offres de services de la chaîne de valeur agricole en privilégiant le numérique. Donc, la digitalisation, pour nous, reste un élément clé que nous allons beaucoup plus encore utiliser dans ce domaine-là, qui nous permet d'être flexible, d'être rapide, d'être complémentaire, efficace, surtout sur des chaînes de logistique et de services. Nous continuerons donc à automatiser les processus de production agricole. Et un élément important sur lequel nous continuerons à travailler, c'est le recyclage de l'eau, de tout objet qui permet d'augmenter le taux d'utilisation des énergies renouvelables et faire de l'extension des réseaux routiers ruraux un élément central pour l'accès des produits des zones de production vers les marchés. Donc voilà, mesdames et messieurs, ce que je voudrais partager avec vous, surtout en mettant l'accent sur la nécessité d'avoir une vision qui met l'accent sur l'inclusion, mais aussi sur la création d'emplois avec des piliers, notamment l'agriculture, en nous basant sur les forces de nos économies et en mettant également le digital au cœur de toute cette transformation. Je voudrais vous remercier pour votre attention. Je voudrais clore ici mon propos et en vous souhaitant au nom du chef de l'État togolais, son Excellence M. Faure et Sozino Nyasingbe, de fructueux travaux. Merci pour votre attention.
Merci beaucoup, Madame la Première ministre. I will, without further ado, quickly give the floor now to Ms. Josefa Sacco, African Union Commissioner for Rural Economy and Agriculture, for her remarks. Excellency, you have the floor.
Good afternoon. Thank you for giving the floor, moderator. Good afternoon. Good morning, depending where you are connected from. I will first of all like to acknowledge Son Excellence, Madame Victoire Tomaga Dogwe, la Première ministre de la République du Togo, et féliciter Madame la ministre pour la vision qu'elle a pu partager avec nous sur le programme de l'opportunité d'emploi en République du Togo. Mes félicitations, on voit que vraiment c'est une priorité pour la jeunesse au Togo et je vous félicite pour votre exposé. Mr. Rodrigo de la Pieta, Director of FAO Brussels, Dr. Maximo Torero, Chief Economist of FAO, the EU Commissioner, I think the EU Commissioner that is there, dear colleague, distinguished participants, all protocol duly observed. Let me begin by thanking the organizer of this webinar, both for the opportunity to speak again at this dialogue. This is my second time I'm participating in this dialogue, and for the casting the spotlight of this important topic on creating job for young people in Africa as part of Build Back Better and Greener. This is a very important topic that African Union is really concentrating, and is one of our priority. Africa has the youngest population in the world, with almost 20 million people between the age of 15 and 24, a number expected to double by 2045. Even before the pandemic, job creation has not kept pace. 60% of the African unemployed are youth, and even more are underemployed. While between 10 and 12 million young people enter the workforce each year, only 3.1 million jobs are created in Africa. That is too much. While we have 10 to 20 million of workforce that need job, only 3.1 million jobs are created on the continent. Sitting across 34 African countries regard unemployment as the top problem facing their nation. In the absence of job, Africa's youth present a threat to social cohesion and political stability, as demonstrated by the deadly migration to Europe through the Mediterranean in search of opportunity. African women and young people are more likely to be affected by the impact of the COVID-19 because of their already vulnerable social and economic status. Young employment for those between the age of 15 to 29 is estimated at 40.2% in Northern Africa, 41.3% in Southern Africa, 54.9% in West Africa, 65.4% in Central Africa, and 74.8% in Eastern Africa. Young women tend to be worse affected, and this situation might be exacerbated by the economic downturn and its negative impact on the employment sector due to the COVID-19 pandemic. Ladies and gentlemen, the remaining part of my contribution will be devoted to how then do we create job needed by youth, especially in the agriculture sector, which I supervise at the African Union Commission. Tens of millions of jobs will have to be created each year, especially in rural areas, for Africa to harness the dividends of the useful population in line with the African Union Malabo Declaration, which sets agricultural goal for 2025 and the need to create job opportunity for at least 30% of youth in agricultural value chain across the continent. We had our biannual review report, and nothing of this no progress is being registered on our second biannual review report to ensure that by 2025 we have 30% of job creation for the youth. Given that agriculture is an essential driver of economic development and an area of great opportunity for young people in Africa, harnessing opportunity along the agri-food system value chain could contribute to improving the sector's image, increases productivity and return to investment, and provide new employment opportunity, hence attracting more young people, ensuring long-term food and nutrition security, and transforming African economy. Agriculture, contrary to the common belief, is a knowledge-intensive enterprise, requiring new techniques, new seeds, and new strategy, especially in the context of climate change and emerging diseases and pests. It's really a very complex area. It's not just a business like usual. It's really a knowledge-intensive enterprises. The challenge posed by such enterprise call for a new generation of farmers. Majority of farmers in Africa are above 60 and above. So we need a young generation of farmers to continue feeding Africa, mostly with the demographic increase in the population on the continent. Involving more young people in farming is therefore crucial for the attainment of the objective of the Agenda 2060 of the Africa we want. But major shifts in power dynamics and perception are needed to ensure that Africa's next generation embrace agriculture. In order to inspire young people to venture and succeed in agriculture and agribusiness, which is projected to be a $1 trillion industry by 2030 in Africa, we should appreciate and celebrate agricultural entrepreneurship. This recognition of agricultural entrepreneurship will go a long way to reduce its stigmatization and permeate the society from rural classroom to the boardroom of African banks. There has been, over the last years, tremendous progress in digitalizing agriculture in Africa. Digitalization is already being used to secure basic supply essential for farm operation activities, reaching farmers with advisory, market information, financial and supply chain services. Other support could include increasing access to finance. This is a very important point, financing, because at times youth, they have their own project, but they don't have access to finance, such as introducing youth targeted subsidy for smallholder producers and businesses, reducing interest rates on agricultural credit loan, and reducing fees and tax requirements, distribution of input to young rural casual workers and entrepreneurs in the rural areas. In the framework of the Comprehensive African Agricultural Development Program, CADEP, and the 2014 Malabo Declaration on Accelerated Agricultural Growth and Transformation for Livelihood and Share Opportunity, my department has developed frameworks, guidelines, and tools to facilitate youth access to agriculture productive resources and agribusiness. These documents are now being popularized at the regional and national level for mainstreaming into national policies and legal framework. We need the support of our partners in taking this way forward. In 2019, the chairperson of the African Union Commission launched the 1 million by 2021 initiative to catalyze action for youth development in Africa by targeting direct investment in millions of African youth in 4 key elements of employment, in 4 key elements of the 4 E's, which is employment, entrepreneurship, education, and engagement, the 4 E's. Through leveraging partnership and the private sector opportunity. Since then, we have seen concerted effort from member states and partners to support the initiative and expand opportunity for African young people. The Commission continues to strengthen these efforts with policy, advocacy, and partnership for the advancement of its youth agenda. I thank you for your kind attention. Merci beaucoup pour votre attention. Muito obrigado, muitas gracias. Shukran.
Thank you very much, Excellency. Your presence always gives a strong message of the fruitful collaboration between the African Union, FAO, and you brought so many interesting messages in your speech. I'm sure our speakers will touch on many of them later on. Unfortunately, Professor Yunus was unable to join our high-level panel this morning. He had an overlapping commitment at his university, really last minute, he informed us right now. So now we will start with the second part. We will start by setting the scene. We will start the second part with the FAO's chief economist, Máximo Torero Cuyen. We're very pleased to have a last-minute, very special guest, Carla Montesi, Director of Planet and Prosperity at the European Commission's Directorate General for International Cooperation and Development, and Shangon Lee, Director of the Employment Policy Department at the International Labour Organization. Many thanks to the three of you for being here and sharing your expertise with us today. So let me first start by turning to Máximo. Máximo, FAO's added value regarding specific rural affectations and opportunities in the agri-food value chains, which I know is one of your favorite themes, and access to markets, it's undoubted. We're looking forward to hearing a little bit more about it from you.
Yes, if I can share my screen, great. Thank you very much. It's a pleasure to be here. And it's very nice to share the panel with the honor of sharing the panel with the two of you. So let me explain you what I want to look at, and basically what I'm trying to look is at the youth in the agri-food system and innovation in the context of COVID-19, and that requires all the elements of access to markets and so on. But COVID-19, as all of you know, has created and basically brought to light several problems that we were facing before and where we need to do changes. And we shouldn't be running from those. The problem I see is that normally We try to find the short-term solution for the problems generated by COVID-19, but we don't tackle the structural problems behind what COVID-19 is showing us, which already was there. So first, it's important to understand that young people, especially rural youth, young agri-entrepreneurs and young informal workers, and young migrants and young women are among the most affected by the pandemic. And this has been seen across the countries of the world, not only in Africa, but across the world. The disruption of the ability of people to move and migration labor to be able to do their jobs have been constrained. But more than that, if we look at the value chains and if we look at the job allocation across the value chains, what we have seen is that from all the job generated in the food systems, 35% of it could be at risk. And of those jobs, formal and informal, significant of them that are at risk are in the processing, in the packaging, and the distribution. So 60% of those within those areas are at risk, and those jobs are mainly done by young people or by females mostly, which is opening even more the inequalities and even more creating a bigger problem. So, but those disruptions is telling us several things. One is telling us that a lot of informality in the labor sector, in the youth, and in the female labor market. Second is telling us that in agriculture, there is a lot of labor segmentation, meaning that certain type of activities are exclusively done by females, for example, like packaging and processing. And third, we should be looking at what is happening in terms of incomes and wages, because if they are informal, they are very vulnerable to things that what we observe in the current situation of COVID-19. So those are structural problems, no? Problems of formality, problems of gender inequality and gender gaps, labor segmentation and potentially discrimination, and problems of labor supply and labor demand. How much the labor supply is going to match the labor demand, and how much the skill set that the rural sector is creating will absorb this youth labor. Now, this is something that I think is important to look at when we look at the youth labor. So these are three graphs, okay? The one in the top is a typical graph that we observe, which is a graph of productivity by sector, where we look at the normal average productivity per person per year. And typically we used to say, wow, agriculture is really underperforming in terms of productivity relative to other enterprises, to sectors that earn wages, and so on. The green bar is the one of agriculture. The pink one is wages in industry. The blue bar, wages in services, and then the light blue is in entrepreneur services. So look at agriculture, seems to be very, very low, no? So in terms of average productivity per person per year is very low. So we always complain, or we always question that the labor productivity is too low. Now, if we adjust, and that's the bottom graph, and we adjust this by hour worked, the situation changes substantially. Look at Ethiopia, especially look at Tanzania, how the green bar becomes basically very close statistically to the other bars, meaning that the adjustment per hours worked, the productivity really is not so low. And that's the correct way to do it. The productivity is high. So what this is telling us, if you look at the graph in the average hours work in the right-hand side, is that agricultural sector is working a lot less hours in average per day than the other sectors. And that's why when we just do a simple average of productivity, it's so low. But when we adjust by the hours worked, it's higher, significantly higher, and close to the productivity of other sectors. So what is the message I want to bring? The message I want to bring is that we need to find ways to complete the crop calendar of these farmers, of the youth, of people working in this sector, this migrant labor. Because yes, they are migrant labor, they are moving in and out, depending on the harvest period. Okay, but that requires something else. It requires, okay, how we do this, how we attract this migrant labor to different harvests in different climate zones, in different periods, in different crop calendars, so that we can fill the youth labor supply in this labor demand, which is seasonal. Okay, now there is a very good experience in my country, in Peru. We did two things at the same time. We formalized and we fill the crop calendar. How? By changing the labor legislation. Basically, for agricultural sectors, we allow that there is seasonality. So meaning that a company can hire labor for a period of time which they need and make that labor formal, paying insurance and paying severance payments. And then another company can hire the next season with the possibility of this employer to move from one formal job to another formal job. And with that, we were able to fill the calendar of the worker, and it ended in full employment in the coast. So just adjusting the labor legislation, because a company, or an agro-processor, or a farmer association doesn't want to hire formally a labor worker because it could create a problem, no? It's too many costs, on too many regulations on the formal labor market. But if you provide that flexibility, that this employee can be temporarily hired formally, so that at least he will get Social Security and health insurance, okay? And I'm talking of more sophisticated things. He will be able to move from one job to the other and fill his calendar. Then we can take advantage of this productivity and we can create a more formal job for these people. So we need to find ways of innovative legislations that will allow us to tackle both problems, the problem of the calendar and the problem of the formality. And why it's so important? Because if we don't have formal jobs, I don't see how we're going to get quality jobs for these people. And that's something that we need to think very carefully. Now, what is happening in COVID-19 is people are finding their way. They're trying to be innovative. They're trying to find innovative ways to adapt. And they're trying to link to digital technologies and trying to find ways in which they can respond to the crisis. As any informal employer or employee, they're trying to find a solution. But again, we are not resolving the structural problem. We are basically finding intermediate solutions that will solve the short-term problem, which is okay, but not the structural problem. And we have to take advantage of the crisis, because if we are going to have a crisis like the one we have today, which is enormous, and we are going to start supporting people, because we need to support people that have lost their employment because of informality and because of the lockdowns, then one way is to use that support as a way to formalize these employees and then start a process of formalization. Because today, if I give a cash transfer, I will give the transfer to the people which is in my roster. But if I give that cash transfer with some formality behind, then I could start involving them more in the formal world, and then a legislation of labor, like the one I was proposing, could help the process. And that could start to resolve this structural problem, so that in the future we don't have this type of limitations. Now, FAO supports countries in adapting and implementing youth-inclusive and employment-centered agri-food system development with policies and strategies and programs. And we advocate for tailored economic and financial stimulus packages and social protection mechanisms and skills development. But again, let's use these opportunities and mechanisms to formalize. And we need to invest further in distance learning and digital innovation. That's a topic of capabilities, which is really important, and I will explain why. And then we need to engage the youth in shaping the response and boosting support to youth agri-entrepreneurs through startups. There is so much innovation going on in the youth that we need to take advantage to be able to bring and create these additional jobs and to tailor the impact. Now, why this capacity building is so important? What we are seeing in COVID-19 is a huge process of automatization, a huge process of digital technologies. And what will happen if we are not careful is that the new employment will displace a significant amount of jobs today that don't have the capabilities. This is when the labor demand doesn't match the labor supply. So labor demand is what we are asking for. And if I am asking for skills like digital skills, capabilities and automatization, and I don't have those skills in the youth, then I will have a lot of people with more unemployment. So capacity building needs to rush at this point. It needs to accelerate enormously. And that's what we need to do as FAO and the African Union and all our partners. We need to find ways in which we can start to create the skills that this new labor demand is asking for us. And COVID-19 is changing this process, accelerating it too much. If not, we are going to have a problem. And we are late already. So it's the time to change. So just to finalize, my main message here is, let's take this problem that we are facing, a terrible problem, as an opportunity to formalize better, to find a legislation that is flexible for a sector which needs that flexibility because of seasonality, to use the systems of transfers and so on to start this process of formalization. But don't forget that we need to have the capabilities in place right now and rush them, because the system is changing. We are moving into a digital mechanism of agriculture and automatization process that is happening already in Africa. And if we don't have the capabilities and take advantage of this huge rural labor force that we have in Africa, we are going to lose the opportunity and we are going to have a bigger problem later on. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Maximo. Let me now turn to Ms. Carla Montesi, Placing employment within the main priorities for international partnerships is fundamental, no doubt. A Green Deal constitutes here a key overall umbrella, a cornerstone of the new European vision. Ms. Montesi, we're eager to hear a bit more from your contribution. Ms. Montesi, are you there? I can see you, but you're muted.
Hello?
We can hear you now. Good morning. We can hear you.
Yes, many thanks. Yes, okay, many thanks. And so sorry, but there is some problem with the lines, so I hope that we will succeed. Many thanks for excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, dear colleagues, dear friends, I will say. This panel. And we have also listened many key elements for our debate, and thank you, Maximo, for the illustration once again of the clear data that we have in front of us. As you mentioned, COVID-19, together with conflict, insecurity in many parts of Africa, West and East, with pest, desert, locusts, climate change, of course, it's pushing a million more people to the brink of starvation, and we clearly can say that we are not really progressing to our 2030 agenda and to our SDG 2, but on the contrary, we are really regressing. Of course, this is fully unacceptable, and most of vulnerable are women, children, youth, so this debate is more than appropriate. We can see from the last data that Massimo, you have mentioned, that all this situation will push nearly 50 million more women and girls into the extreme poverty by 2021. And of course, when we look to all this and we look to the future for youth people, we know that the risk is there that if we cannot address, of course, we will have the situation that will be much worse than is now. So we need to look to the youth, to the education, to the need, safety, jobs, to the future of life, family, to decent living conditions, including the basic, the electricity, the health services, the healthy food. So this implies that really will launch what we call a long-term strategy for a more sustainable and equitable food system. Let me say that, as you mentioned, we are clearly in a crucial turning point. It's now that we need absolutely to get it right. It's the moment where we need to build back better. It's what we're saying, build back better, more sustainable for an equal world. And we need to put all our energy to reversing these negative trends that we have in front of us in terms of nutrition, in terms of food security, in terms of job. What I can say from the report is that we are, as you know very well, fully engaged in this. We're putting what we call the Build Back Better, the recovery plan, the global and green recovery plan as one of our first priority for the European Union. And you know that we clearly say that we have 1 million jobs by month that is needed in Africa, and that we would like to create also through sustainable agri-food system. This is clearly one key element, and you know that our priority in the agenda that we have adopted and that we want to clearly diffuse and enlarge to worldwide, it's the holistic approach that we have taken with the Green Deal. When you look to this Green Deal, you know now what are our building block of this approach. And the first building block of the Green Deal is clearly the farm to fork strategy. We have proposed a vision, a vision that implied to make Europe food system sustainable in economic, social, and environmental sense. And of course, we want to tackle this challenge at the global level. So we hope that we succeed doing this in Europe, but we succeed also inspiring this change around the world. This is our intention. And let me say that this implies that we will use all our instruments that could be, of course, the dialogue, the cooperation, our trade, agreement to work with our partner countries into this, and of course to succeed to work together to healthy people, societies, and the planet. The second building block is, of course, the investment. As you mentioned, we need to invest in people now. The capacity, continue to increase the capacity building of our partner countries will be huge in all this new domain, new and old domain, and especially focusing on rural areas, on rural women, on rural youth, because these are the ones that will feed the families. And maybe, as you know, yesterday we have launched the Gender Action Plan, that is ambitious visions for gender equality, human rights worldwide, including all our work for women and girls in rural areas, in women and girls that are fully engaged in the agricultural sector. Now, we clearly, as I was mentioning, want to put all our resources in looking to this food system sustainability that we believe that will be the key also for the creation of job for young and the women. And I can say to you that we are advance looking to these tools, goals, and we at least would like to have these as key elements in our new program. We are working to our new programming exercise. As maybe of you know, we will have the new financial portfolio. Let me say that we are absolutely intended to work with our partner countries into this domain. You know that we are working through a Team Europe approach. Team Europe approach implies to work together, European institutions, member states, financial institutions, with our partner countries in order to create a Team Europe initiative, a big initiative. And I am happy to see that already from now, looking to the first work that is under preparation, we have more than 7 Team Europe initiatives that will focus on food crisis, will focus on the food sustainability and on food system. So we will have the occasion to elaborate in all this, but I can say from now that when we look at the work that is ongoing, of course, supporting national and regional agricultural value chain will be mentioned. Of course, we know that supporting, as Maximo you just said, supporting this national and regional agricultural value chain will be key, creating employment, including for youth, and this will be at the core of our action. We have already seen our first action that we are putting in place, looking to some international chain, including cocoa and the coffee, that, as we know, offer options, clear option for improvement in the quality and in the quantity of the value chain, but also in fully link with the creation of employment and employment for youth. So looking to this value chain, to the investment, to the capacity building, increased capacity building in this domain, including the education, including improvement in the skills. of everyone, could be governments, could be our farmers organization, could be from youth and women, will be an essential factor that we would like to tackle through this Team Europe initiative. And of course, in all this, we will have a particular look to the most vulnerable people that are facing with food crisis. So I stop here. Many thanks. This for us, this debate today, it's a key debate, one of the numerous debates that we have to lead to our food system summit. Let me say, reiterate once again that the European Union is fully engaged in having the most successful output to this food system summit. So all this dialogue and the ongoing work with all key partners are key in order to achieve the best results that we'll have. So many thanks once again. Thanks to FAO to have organized this one debate once again, and I hope that the panel that we follow will be able to enter in much more detail on solutions that we can have in front of us. Just to conclude, also saying that, of course, youth, as you know, will be key in our dialogue, in our debate. We are clearly focused, and this is one of the key priorities also of our commissioner, to try to do everything that it's possible in order that include youth in everything that we do. Also consultation, discussion with youth when we talk about green recovery, building back better, building a new program, a new partnership with our partner countries in the future. Of course, the clear intention is to listen also the voice of young people working in all this domain. Over to you. Many thanks.
Thank you, Ms. Montesi. We will actually hear from a young agripreneur in our technical panel. And I really hear a speaker so far ringing the alarm bell and asking for this holistic approach you just described, also the Team Euro approach, as you said, to tackle the challenges. So I would like now to hear from ILO, from Mr. Shangon Lee. Mr. Lee, may I ask you to give us an overview of the rural youth situation in the context of the employment in Africa, and what do you think are the effects of COVID-19, a pandemic 9 months later?
Okay, thank you so much. Let me first thank the FAO for your kind invitation, and also I'm really pleased to be here with the honorable ministers and the commissioners and colleagues and friends to discuss this very important issue. Maximo and Carla already have given a very excellent overview of the latest development and issues and challenges. So what I'm going to do is a bit of elaborate some of the points actually relating to world work, particularly on the decent jobs for young people in Africa. As you know, the Africa region is expecting probably its worst contraction in economic term for the last 25 years. It's quite a big number. And so we are trying to understand what will be the overall implication of this economic contractions for the labor market and the work opportunity, especially in Africa. At the first, we have to remember that the population in the region, actually that's the Maximo actually already mentioned, will continue to grow dramatically, with some 300 million young women and men reaching working age between 2020 and 2030. But we have the economic contraction now and a very slow growth in economic diversification. So you can imagine what will be the pressures on the labor market, especially in the rural economy, will be in the years to come. Second, I mean, even not looking at this actually long-term pressure, the pandemic is already causing massive disruption in the labor market already in many different ways. Income losses and disruption in education, increasing informality, as mentioned by the Maximo. And the young people in particular has been dramatically affected in both actually work opportunities and education training. You can say this time we have simultaneous impact on labor demand and the labor supply as well. So for instance, our latest survey done through the UN Global Initiative on Decent Jobs for Youth, basically showing 65% of young people reported having learned less since the pandemic began. And of course, many of them are stopped actually learning completely. And 1 in 6 young people in the survey, they stopped working since the outbreak of the virus. So we also learned around 17% of young people are probably affected by anxiety and depression. I mean, given the shock, we shouldn't be surprised about the psychological effect of young people. Number 3, this pressure is even greater on the young women and women. So women's employment at greater risk at the moment than men because of the impact of lockdown in the service sector, and also the higher informality among young people, young active women as well. And COVID-19 crisis definitely laid bare the entrenched gender equality in the labor market, and I'm afraid it may further exacerbate gender equality in actually, especially in unpaid care work that will somehow wipe out the or modest actually the gain we have achieved in the gender equality for the last 25 years or so. The last and not least, particularly in Africa, being a woman and also being a young people means additional barriers to employment, which actually push young people towards migration and or the radicalization, as we know very well. Such risk is particularly high among the rural young people who are most likely to migrate in response to lack of the gainful employment and entrepreneurial opportunities. So these challenges are really daunting and for all of us, and probably in the years to come. But I hope we shouldn't be too pessimistic here either, because it all boils down to what we are going to do from now on. Despite all these challenges, we strongly believe the opportunities to scale rural employment, including for youth in agriculture sector, will exist as the real opportunities. Urbanization and rising urban incomes, dietary diversification, deepened concern about the climate resilience and environment sustainability, and youth-driven innovation, as actually Maxime highlighted, they're all driving transformation, for example, in agri-food systems. If we manage them well, and in other areas as well, then there will be great opportunity for creating decent jobs. Furthermore, these different options for the development of the agriculture sector for decent jobs really exist. For that, I have to emphasize, we need a much better data and analysis and dialogue and policy development. In short, evidence-based policies and social dialogue. This is crucial. This is why ILO and the FAO and CIRAD are working together on a project called the Job Agri project, which will investigate the capacity of the agriculture and agri-food sectors to create decent employment through better data collection and on the labor contents of different farming systems and also related agricultural development models. In doing so, I mean, this is a crucial point. We need to bring young people at the center of the policy development. African economies are young, as many pointed out, and rural. And so we cannot talk about the harnessing the continent's demographic dividends without considering measures to facilitate such structural transformation. This is why actually ILO and the FAO, we have been building on the long history of the collaboration and now taking leadership in advancing a decent job for young people in the rural economy, particularly through the UN Global Initiative on Decent Jobs for Youth. For that, actually, we need to bring all stakeholders, and including social partners and others, to addressing many issues like skill shortages and green jobs, and transition to formal jobs, and investment in public goods and infrastructure, and access to land, to name a few. So let me conclude. I must say, the crucial test for global recovery efforts in the years to come, I mean, the real test, one of the real tests is how successful we will be in creating decent jobs for young people in rural Africa. And we very much look forward to continue to work with you, the FAO and the European Commission and African Union on these crucial issues. Thank you very much. Over to you.
Thank you, Mr. Lee. It was good to understand a little bit better the underlying causes and policy situation of the current context. So thank you for that. I invite you all three to stay with us. And for now, let me jump directly to a very short video, which I think you will enjoy because it really shows this very strong United Nations collaboration we have. It is an FAO ILO project that together with the government of Zambia has created over 3,000 jobs for rural youth and has supported thousands of young entrepreneurs. Can we see the video, please?
So I'm looking at agriculture through diversification. So I'm trying to bond all these farming activities which are on the farm, where the water from the ponds can water the gardens. The waste material from the piggery, from the chicken run, can come in to the pond, forming plankton, which the fish would feed on. And if that happens, I would reduce on the cost of buying more feeds for the fish. And at the end of the day, my fish will grow and my budget will drop.
Thank you, colleagues. No, just to say also that we will be having a video from Professor Yunus that we will post on our channel later on, talking about the theme of today. And we also had with us for a bit the Secretary of the FAO Nobel Alliance on Food Security and Nutrition. So I'm also curious to see how our Menti is doing. Let's look quickly at our word cloud. So, okay, access to finance, things our panelists already mentioned, infrastructure, inequality, these seem to be the keywords standing out so far. Let me go now directly into our technical panelists. In the meantime, please put some your questions in the box that you see at the bottom of the screen. We will try to answer as many of them at the end if we have time. Otherwise, we will make sure we'll come back to you. Just make sure to indicate your name, your organization, and for which panelist the question is. So our expert panelists are looking forward to that. Let me start with the agripreneur, as I said before, Mr. Kabito. You are the National Coordinator and CEO at the Young Farmers Federation of Uganda. Then after his intervention, we will have Benjamin Davis, FAO Director of the Inclusive Rural Transformation and Gender Equality Division at FAO. Mr. Hoppe also welcome. Mr. Marty Hoppe, he's the head of the Food and Nutrition Security, Global Food Policy and Fisheries Division at the German Federal Ministry for Economic Cooperation and Development, BMZ. And finally, we'll have Mr. Leonard Mitty, head of Unit for Rural Development, Food Security, Nutrition at the European Commission's Directorate General for International Cooperation and Development. A warm welcome to you all. Let me start with you, Kabito. Your federation has 54 members, if I'm not mistaken. There are young farmers associations, farmer youth groups, school agricultural clubs. There's a total of 24,000 young Africans. It is really impressive. From your experience, could you tell us more about the challenges that the agri-food system workers are facing in Africa, and especially in light, of course, of the COVID-19 pandemic?
Thank you so much, Venti, for this opportunity, and thank you, FAO, for availing me this opportunity to talk to you this afternoon here in Kampala. I'm Dennis Kabito, the CEO for the Young Farmers Federation of Uganda, an umbrella body for youth in agribusiness. Yes, the numbers and the statistics you have talked about are the right ones for our organization, being the only national youth organization in Uganda. With the challenges, yes, even before COVID and after COVID. Some of the intrinsic challenges were there that are already known to you, especially aspects of land, which is a critical factor of production, and then the access to credit, finance, and capital to start business. The illiteracy levels were high, and farm succession not catered for, especially by all the generations who is to take over the farm instead of disproportionating it. Then the perceptions and attitudes are still a big, big challenge, especially thinking that we who are in agriculture are failures or in fact, doing some dirty job, but also the profitability of farms. So those have been there even before COVID. But with COVID coming in, especially for us in Uganda and especially in March, there were some specific challenges that were brought to the agri-workers. And with the agri-workers or the workers on farm, these include the farmers themselves because they're the owners, the laborers who are part-time laborers, and then their children or even the relatives, because most of the farming units are family households. What happened with especially to the young people? There was loss of jobs or the downsizing of staff on the farms, because during the lockdown and post-lockdown, and much is still now, like schools are closed, many farms are using their own the labor from their children. So many other youth who are employed on some of the farms lost jobs. Then there was also loss of incomes because of that. And there are other structural problems along the value chain, especially when you look at the input side. The supply chain on rural materials for production was cut because of the lockdown. And again, there's been total disruption in this one. And then there was also poor or limited access to inputs by these young people who are producing. And there was a drastic rise in the prices for the commodities. But there was a drastic drop in the prices for the products that are coming from the farms. In the production side, there was also the direct extension services were negatively affected. They couldn't connect, especially the young people could not receive them. And there was a lot of flotation of produce from the farms because of less mobility by the farmers, but also the vendors and everybody, because there was also sometimes complete lockdown. On the market side, there was reduced mobility of the customers because they're at home, and this has still affected some, even if, for example, in Uganda, in the districts that have been still hotspots and the border districts, there was less mobility for the customers or traders. And there is still closure of public markets. And these are the most important areas or market avenues for many producers. And if they are closed, then meaning that the buyers have to go direct to the farms, and this reduces the bargaining power of the producer. And then the demands was also reduced. Remember, the biggest takers of food are the schools, the hospitality centers, and also with tourism and the hotels. So all these were not demanding food. So there was a lot of flotation. And many of the borders were closed. We are in an area as Uganda where also the young people are producing for the Kenyans, for Somalia, for Tanzania, for Rwanda, and all that. So all this was blocked because of the borders, much as the goods were allowed, but there were so many stringent measures in order for the food to move. And also, there has been a changing demand from the customers. So it has been a big challenge, especially for the youth who have lost a lot of jobs during that period and who have lost incomes, and many have slid back to poverty. As you can see, our national economic growth by March, when before lockdown, was at 6.8. And by the third quarter, the ministry announced was at 3.1%. So you see, there's so many have slid back to poverty. And remember, we have a very young population. We have the second youngest population in the world. But also we have another problem in that we are home to the largest refugee population in Africa and the second globally. So meaning we had to feed all these and there was less food for them.
Vito, may I just interrupt you because we have very little time left. If you could just wrap up in 10 seconds your intervention to move to the next speaker. Thank you.
Yes, I was wrapping up. So the underlying risk now and after COVID is that production chains have been disrupted, and the SMEs that youth are engaged in are mostly threatened. There is increased food insecurity, but also informality, because now everybody is you can just beg for the job. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. Let me turn directly to Mr. Hoppe from the German Ministry. Could you talk a little bit about the specific work of the German Federal Ministry and what does BMZ response is to COVID-19, also of course related to our theme, the youth employment in the agri-food sector?
Yes, thank you very much and a warm welcome to everyone. Let me very briefly quick by highlighting Germany is maybe the largest bilateral donor when it comes to rural development and food security. We're investing around about 1.8 billion euro annually just in this field. And let me also please remind you of the German initiative for rural youth employment that we started 2017 within G20. And of course, now with international cooperation probably improving in the future, we will push to make this more operational and more successful. Maybe since FAO was here, I would like to point out so that colleagues can read to a policy research paper, a study that we commissioned ZEF, German Research Institute, and FAO with to look at, but also, of course,
I think your connection, Mr. Hoppe.
Sorry, I lost the line. I hope I'm back. Can you hear me?
Yes, but you're breaking a bit. In case you cannot hear us, maybe we can move to Leonard Mitty for the time that you're connecting back, perhaps. Are you back?
I am back, if I may.
Of course.
And I would just like for everyone, I would be happy to share this document, but I would want to reiterate what Maximo Torero already pointed out. In this study, there is a clear indication of what exactly are the policies we need to implement. And it says, I want to quote just one sentence: the mix of identified low-cost, high-impact interventions include agricultural research and development, agricultural extension services, digital agriculture information systems, female literacy, and small scaling up of social protection programs. So these are the interventions, low-cost interventions that will very effectively promote and help achieve SDG 2, but also, of course, as Maximo rightly pointed out, aim at the right research, aim at the right education of people. So this is, I believe, a very important intervention we need to do. And thirdly, what is our engagement? We invested in, and I would like to attract attention on the African Agriculture Trade and Investment Fund. Is a fund we started with 30 million euros just now. It's to provide loans to companies because Ms. Sacco, the Commissioner of the African Union, rightly pointed out the need for finance. So we're providing loans to companies to secure income and employment of some 120,000 people with this fund alone. We also funded the Rural Poor Stimulus Facility that is done in
We try to reconnect. Mr. Hoppe.
So these are, it's a pity my line seems breaking. So these are some of these interventions that we very concretely have engaged in. And I would like to conclude with really pointing out the importance and relevance of the Food System Summit. It was already highlighted by Carla Montesi. I think this is a very decisive moment. We now have a chance to really take all this knowledge that we have, but also the experiences from the COVID-19 pandemic, take it to the Food System Summit, look at transforming our food systems to more local production, more local value chain, more value generation, because we not only it is creating jobs, but it is also creating more resilient food systems. So it is a win-win situation to look into local production, local value addition, shorter value chains. This would be in a very nutshell my short intervention.
Thank you very much. Thank you for being with us also today, despite the small technical problems. I will turn now to Leonard Mitzi. Commissioner Urpilainen is very committed to the topic of youth employment, no doubt. But what do you see as the main actions that the EU and its African counterparts should take in this regard? And how do you see the interconnection with the other pillars of the strategy, the EU-Africa strategy and the European Green Deal?
Thank you, Mirto, and good afternoon, colleagues. We have been discussing these topics quite some time in the past weeks. Martin mentioned G20. I recall 3 years ago when I was in Berlin, there was the unveiling of what is known as the G20 Initiative for Rural Youth Employment. I think in an event like this, we don't need to reinvent any wheel. The pathways are known, what needs to be done. It's a question of giving the voice to the youth, like our fellow brother from Uganda, and that these are embedded in the dialogues at country level. Because we can go to meetings, we go to seminars, and very often the role of youth is not heard. So I think the first, and Martin mentioned the UN Food System Summit, it is critical that at a national level, in the food system dialogues, youth are given not only a voice, a place to air their voices, but clearly a role in the transformation of the national agenda. Because we have lots of plans, we have lots of implementation documents. The question is, what is the role of youths in the transformation agenda on land tenure? This week we were involved in the International Land Coalition Conference. Evidently there are big problems of issues around national laws to actually give empowerment to youth or to women-led organizations. As European Commission, and rightly said, Mirto, our Commissioner, Ms. Urpilainen, is giving a lot of emphasis to youth, to gender, and to civil society organizations. Why? Because it is important that there is a bottom-up approach in terms of this transformation agenda. And I call on the youth across the globe, but in particular in Africa, because one of the discussions we had earlier this week, actually yesterday and before yesterday, was around the Comprehensive Africa Agricultural Development Program, CAADP. CAADP is clearly the country-owned process, the continental-owned process in terms of the transformation of agri-food systems. The question is, how much is it youth or gender mainstreamed? What are the processes which are sensitive to the sensitivities around youth? Whenever we go on mission and we ask agricultural ministers across the continent, you need altogether 54 countries to create 1 million jobs per month. Where are the jobs going to be created concretely? very few have a clear answer of where the jobs are going to be created. It's good to say digital will help. It's good to say innovation will help. Evidently, you can't have transformation without a strong, robust research innovation agenda. But we also know that it's not easy for agriculture or agri-food to absorb those big numbers that we are mentioning. So I think it also requires that the agricultural food system looks into cross-cutting sectors, areas around tourism, around green tourism, around manufacturing activities which are small scale. And I think the key issue of finance is important. Martin mentioned one fund. We have a number of funds which we are trying to make it more accommodating to young first entrants, because it's easy to have ticket sizes of 1 million, 5 million, but these are not the ticket sizes that young people can access or can easily access. So it is important, and that's why with the ABC fund with IFAD, we just launched another fund with Cofides and ACID in Spain, the Horuma fund. And we have also Agrify fund. We are trying to enter, for example, with the ABC fund in small ticket sizes, which are much below the 1 million, possibly in the area of 20,000, 30,000 and 40,000 euros. So I think what is important from a practical point of view is, first of all, that youth organizations, farmer-led youth organizations get in contact with our delegations, but also with ourselves to see how we can help them really have impact on the ground. In our policy dialogue with your governments, that we have a clear entry point through our financial instruments and through our modalities, whether they are budget support or other modalities, including financial instruments. Secondly, that we continue supporting to strengthen yourselves, because a highly fragmented youth or farmer organization will not do transformational change. The value chain will squeeze you out because you will be the weakest link in any case. Thirdly, skills. I can't emphasize the issue of skills. Skills, not only vocational skills, but even primary, secondary level skills. The key issue of financial literacy. There is a major problem, not only in Africa, globally, on financial literacy. You can't have bankable projects if you don't have the basics of financial literacy. So this is very important. You can use a GSM, you can use the best technology, but I think that accounting, finance, wizardry in terms of your interface with local commercial institutions is key. And last but not least, governance, governance, governance. The role of youth in decision-making processes where you have the voice, but also you instill that policy change. And if it's not done, that leaders are held accountable. And that is the role that I know Rodrigo will mention, and the Parliamentary Alliance Against Hunger that we have with our parliamentarians, that we need to start tracking in practical terms, whether they are on value chains, whether they are on finance, what needs to be done so that countries are held accountable on what they promise in the plans and in their speeches. Over to you, Mirto.
Thank you very much, Leonard. Just to say, I see a lot of questions coming in the Q&A. Just rest assured, we will gather them and we'll have our panelists reply to them because we don't have time right now. So I will jump right away to Ben Davis. Ben, we hear a lot about building back better today, but to do it, we must simultaneously address the topics of labor and job creation, agriculture, gender equality, everything that our panelists already mentioned. They're all very much connected. Can you tell us more about how FAO is working to ensure that policies and programs are holistic and inclusive?
Sure, thanks Mirto, and hello to everyone. And I don't want to repeat what everyone else has been saying, right? But I think it's important to stress that young women and men, particularly young women, face very specific constraints, right, to face in the recovery process. And let's say this longer process of food system transformation, which we're all focusing on. Very specific structural constraints, as Maximo and others have mentioned, Formality is a key part of that, but also these specific skills, assets, land, access to financing, which has been stressed, services, this issue of seasonality, and access to political power, which I think Leonard, political power and let's say influence over the public process, which I think Leonard was focusing on. And they also have specific aspirations, let's say, in a globalized world that often go beyond agriculture. And so we need to keep this in mind. I think at FAO, first and foremost, we're currently reformulating our strategic framework, which will guide us in this final push to 2030. And addressing the constraints faced by youth is playing a prominent role. And it's fundamental that all our technical work around this broad process of food systems transformation in addressing climate change, natural resource management, social protection, as Maximo was saying, and Martin, it needs to be brought to bear to address these constraints faced by youth. So I think that's one very important change that is happening at FAO. I think second, in addition to what Maximo has described, is stepping up our work more specifically with governments to generate more and better farm and non-farm employment in agri-food systems. And this is around providing technical support, policy dialogue, as was stressed by Leonard. And it really is about jobs, and preparing young women and men in terms of skills for the opportunities that are emerging within these transforming agri-food systems, and coming at it from both a supply and demand perspective, and really remembering that it needs to be profitable, it needs to be productive, and it needs to work in a market economy. Just quickly to mention kind of some of the very specific things that we're focusing on, particularly in our country level support. It is really around capacity development, building and technical skills, soft skills, business skills. It's linking youth and youth organizations to support services, financial services, incubators, etc. Enhancing these rural incubation services or piloting new financial products. It's coaching, agripreneurs on business plans and business pitches, but also a big emphasis, and I as was stressed by Leonard, around the importance of collective action, of helping informal groups formalize in cooperatives, helping young agripreneurs form networks, with a particular emphasis on empowering youth and their organizations in public policy and public action. I think just a final point I want to make is that really transforming food systems is really about creating jobs and livelihoods. It seems obvious, yet much of the big narrative, let's say, around food system transformation, it focuses on better diets, addressing climate change, natural resource management, and the steps we need to take this, which really have massive implications for the kinds of jobs and livelihoods of hundreds of millions, indeed billions of people around the world. And while we have relatively concrete ideas as what we need to do in terms of healthy diets and climate change, the goal of sustainable livelihoods often gets a lot of hand waving. And I think it's very important in these big discussions in a country level, we bring in these ideas that were mentioned by Martin as well as Leonard, which tend to get overshadowed, let's say, in these big narratives around food system transformation. And I think to make the food system transformation inclusive, to create poverty-reducing employment, to leave no one behind, really requires addressing these structural inequalities in assets and access to services, and the barriers and constraints faced by vulnerable and marginalized population, which include the poor, women in particular, youth, as we've been discussing today, ethnicity, and how all these different dimensions of marginality come together. And this doesn't happen automatically, obviously. It's really conditioned by the underlying structural determinants and political will, governance, the political process. And so just to emphasize, I think, a number of the other points that my colleagues have been making. Thank you very much, Mirta.
Thank you, Ben. You also did a kind of wrap up here, but still we have a last speaker for today who will give the closing remarks. It is Ms. Marlene Mortler. She is member of the European Parliament and of the European Parliamentary Alliance Against Hunger and Malnutrition. She's also the Vice Chair of the Delegation for Relations with South Africa and member of the Committee on Agriculture and Rural Development. You have been listening, Ms. Mortler, to a very interesting and very rich debate Could you tell us the key things that you are taking away from this event?
Yes, thank you, Myrto. It's a pleasure for me to deliver the closing remarks at today's event. First of all, I would like to thank the distinguished guests in today's FAO Brussels Dialogue, Her Excellency Jogbet Omega, Prime Minister of Togo, and Her Excellency Josefa Sako, and Director Carla Montese from EU Director of EU Commission. And taking time, I thank you for taking time out of your busy schedule and honoring us with your presence for this very important topic. Thanks also goes to all colleagues in FAO, ILO, BMZ, EU, and Mr. Kabido, of course, who brought the powerful voice of youth into this important debate. In addition, I thank you, dear Rodrigo de la Puerta, and your team for organizing and for participating in this roundtable event with smart and insightful interventions. We just had an event on the EU-Africa strategy and the Farm to Fork strategy 2 weeks ago. Thank you again, Rodrigo, for your participation. Today's insights were very valuable for all of us and for me in my work as a member of parliament. As governments and development partners take steps to address the economic and social effects of COVID-19, we should note the progress that has been achieved for rural youth in recent years in terms of inclusion in food systems, access to education, vocational education and training, and access to decent employment to be reversed. While in the immediate future, the majority of global resources will be redirected toward the fight against the virus, rural young women and men should remain a top priority both during and after the pandemic. Inclusive and sustainable recovery will not be achieved without fully engaging the youth in shaping the responses. Youth voices need to be heard so that strategies and interventions account for the heterogeneity of their needs. This needs to be taken into account as we work on the broader transformation of food systems, which need to be more inclusive, more sustainable, more efficient, and healthier to contribute to achieve the goals of the 2030 Development Agenda. To achieve this, we, the EU, UN, donors, development partners, governments, parliamentarians, youth networks and organizations, producers and farmers organizations have to work together to ensure multi-sectoral coordination and coherence. The EU's Farm to Fork strategy has the potential to promote the global transition towards a robust and resilient food system and ensure access to affordable and safe food for everyone. The EU's Green Deal should serve as a new guiding vision for sustainable development in this regard in Europe and across in the world. We need to address these challenges jointly. We need multilateralism and collective action more than ever in order to address the fragility of our agri-food systems. With the EU-Africa Summit, but also the United Nations Food System Summit coming up next year, we have key moments to make sure that youth employment in agriculture stays high on the political agenda, and its importance is fully reflected in the discussions. As member of the European Parliament's Committee for Agriculture and Rural Development and member of the European Parliamentary Alliance Against Hunger and Malnutrition, I will work on making sure that today's discussions are feeding into the policy discussions in the EP as we prepare various policy documents linked to the US Green Deal and the EU Africa strategy. I hope that today's dialogue shall be the kickstart, and many further dialogues shall follow to work together in order to ensure youth inclusive policies, strategies, and programs, and employment-centered agri-food system development. Finally, I would like to give an example. I'm from Bavaria, and compared to other German states, Bavaria used to be poor. The right political decisions, however, pushed us in the right direction, and economically speaking, we are the top now. One thing is as important to us now as it was back then. We want and need equal, not identical, living and working conditions in urban and rural areas. That means that young people need to be able to learn and study in rural areas as well. In the case of Bavaria, or authorities, colleges, ministries, and companies were moved to different places in rural areas with success. On a more personal note, I would like to share what my children told me when they were young. We never want to live or work in the city. Even back then, they appreciated the countryside. All of them learned about agriculture and started it to come back to their place of birth and build business for them and their children. And I think Africa has a great potential and wonderful people. This is my vision, my mission, and my wish today I have for Africa. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Mortler, also for sharing this anecdote about your children. I think your children are fascinated by agriculture. I can testify this as a young mother myself. I also would like to thank you especially, I know because it's a very busy week at the Parliament, so thank you for being with us today. This series of seminars of FAO Brussels will be continued. I'm happy to already be able to announce that the next FAO Brussels Dialogue will be held on small island development states and is scheduled for the 10th of December. So tune in for the invitation. Please follow us on our Twitter at FAO Brussels and sign up to our newsletter on our website. So thank you very much all for being here with us today. Thank you for your patience. I know we're over time, and have a very good afternoon.
Thank you, everybody.
Bye, and thank you.
Bye. Thank you.
Bye-bye. Thanks, everyone.